Well, I've been looking to get into shape, and I thought, who better to look to than the greatest sporting institution on the planet as Manchester United? So from now on, I'm living strictly on soup and sandwiches. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory. I'm back, and I'm joined by my very good friends Adam and Andrea. I'm going to start with Andrea. How are we doing, man?
Yeah, good. Interesting about the cut thing again. It was I don't understand it honestly. I don't know what else they're going to cut at this point. Don't they have a leak in the stadium as well? So they're going to have to try and cut through holes there as well. I don't know. It's but yeah. Other than that, I think it's been an interesting weekend and maybe some big like endings to the seasons,
Quite positive. It
perhaps.
definitely feels like that, mate. It definitely feels like that. Yeah, well, I do love the United story that there was a leak of if the person who leaks gets caught, they're going to be sacked, and they even leak to
Yes.
that. It's like just incredible the level of leaks. And if there's only soup about, there's going to be leaks everywhere. Less liquid is what they need in the stadium, surely. But Adam, how you doing, man?
Yeah, very good. I haven't had to be that innovative with my budget, it's fair to say. I'm not too sure a diet of soup and sandwiches would suffice either somehow. But I can imagine Jim Ratcliffe is thinking outside the box here with his kind of demands here. I mean, who'd have thought that he'd be the dietitian when it comes to these kind of things? But no, I'm good. More importantly, how are things with you, mate?
Yeah, as good as to be expected when I take football far too personally. Yeah, it's been a rough weekend, but thankfully I had visitors which were like able to take my mind off the doom that was this weekend. And of course, there's always the consolation that you are not Manchester United. Although it's funny that like Big Jim looks like he's out of A Christmas Carol, and tonight he's probably going to be visited by the three ghosts to congratulate him on his cost-cutting methods. Of course, we shouldn't really be laughing so much because it is genuinely pretty grim. The fact that there's 200 redundancies announced today, like Adam, it's kind of whatever analogy you want to use, fiddling as Rome burns, rearranging the seats on the Titanic, like it all feels just incredibly like he wants to be hated. That can be the only reason behind these moves, right?
Yeah, I mean, just the way that they even phrased this kind of as being a transformational plan. I mean, what's transformational about trying to save 5 or 10% of your kind of current outgoings right now, when in the grand scheme of things, you've got players and strategies that you've implemented as Jim Ratcliffe, and you've subsequently sacked or moved those people on. For example, you've got players on high wages. Surely what you should be doing is looking at the top level and kind of trying to streamline from there onwards. But clearly, I just feel he's a guy with the wrong kind of principles when it comes to the football industry. He doesn't really have a firm grip of the realities of like running a football club and what it entails. I appreciate that maybe there's been things that he's been bought into and he wasn't aware of how maybe deeply toxic the issues are. But in the grand scheme of things, there's a way to do things. And unfortunately, you get found out and your true colors come out when you do things like this. Ultimately, they've lost a lot of morals. They've lost their kind of identity. Subsequently, I feel for the fans because that is, whilst we can all be taking the piss and enjoying this kind of demolish and downfall of the club, I think it is them that suffer the most in this whole scenario. And yeah, I'd hate for a guy like him to be running my club. Let's put it that way. So I can only imagine what they're going through right now.
Well, I think they're kind of in this ideal situation, both Ineos and Glazers, that they can both just kind of blame each other for what each other are doing. So, like, every time Ineos do something, they go, oh, well, you see the state that the Glazers left this club in, we've got no choice. And then they do something, and the Glazers are like, well, we're not in control, it's not our fault. He does something, like, it's out of our hands. So I think it's just literally by the day, Manchester United get further and further and further and further away and I mean by a chasm. Like everything that comes out, you're like, oh, that's another 5 years before they win the league. That's another year before they're challenging again. Because everything is just so based on, I don't know what it is, selfishness, greed, whatever it is. All they want to do is seemingly, they're one step away from asset stripping the club, basically, in terms of trying to get the money out. The dividends go into the Glazers as well. And like we all joke about, I'm enjoying Manchester United being crap, but I don't want the tea lady to lose a job. If you know what I mean, I want Casemiro to lose his job. Like, if you know what I mean, it's not like and it's the people at the wrong end that are being punished here. But like Andrea, it really is grim what we're seeing. But there's nothing they can really do now. United fans are protesting again. They're organising a protest for the Arsenal game. Apparently, they're not going to turn up to watch as some kind of message. Like, do you think they've kind of gone from the pan into the fire, right? It just seems even worse than it was under the Glazers.
Yeah, and I think the protests and stuff, unfortunately, isn't going to really do much change. Unfortunately, it should be looking at some sort of change in approach. But the way it's run, the way he's doing it, is literally ignoring, all the major issues and just finding the easier option per se, which is harsh to say, but this is what this type of persons will do. They'll think the easy option is to cut those things and thinking it's not a big issue, but it really is. You hear so many stories how like these people, the receptionist at Manchester United that was there for a while. There's so many connections of just even the simplest jobs, the people they connect with. You even hear the stories back in the day where like the charity balls, where you signed charity balls. Alex Ferguson was very strong on that. They all signed it and they all spoke with the relevant person properly and treated them with respect like they were a team player. It's just a cultural thing that is embedded, and it's just that's also taken out now off the pitch. And I think when you're already seeing on the pitch how their souls being like sucked out in terms of their winning dominance, the way they play, the way it's run, the transfers, everything about them, that's just gonna make it even worse. And when it's off the pitch now doing that, you're literally taking the final parts of the culture, the embodiment of the team. And I think that's the sad reality. And like you said, I completely agree. I grew up hating Man United because they were so good. I wanted them to lose, but I don't. You don't want to see this. This is not.
Yeah.
At this point, this goes beyond football. This is like really bad situation. So yeah, hopefully this gets maybe changed. But again, the public side of it, the fan that just being like, oh yeah, but it's going to be the greater good for the women's team. Like I think that's quite disrespectful in itself because it's trying to say that it's trying to cover all the mess just to say it's going to improve these types of teams when it isn't. It's going to make it even worse and more toxic, which they need to get out of. So yeah, it's a whole mess, and it's just going to keep going at this rate.
And it's hard to tell, like, I don't know, because you mentioned the women's team, it's hard to tell what's accurate and what's new because there's so many leaks and stuff. But when you hear that he asked the captain of the women's team, oh, who are you? What do you do at the club? Like, you can't do that and then be like, oh, yeah, this is for the good of the women's team, that they've kicked off their own training pitch so that the men can play on, and they've kicked into the temporary changing room so that the men can change there. And like, every press release just seems to be another shot in his foot, and like, or just that he genuinely thinks people aren't intelligent enough to see through what he's saying. Like, and I can't imagine his business practices are much better, whether it's football or whatever business he owns. I imagine he has a very similar outlook across all of them. But yeah, it's just incredibly grim, and hopefully for United something can be done and something can be changed, but it's not looking good. In terms of people not looking good on the screen, the next one, here we go. I've had a bit of a bee in my bonnet about this lad all season, but I think last night, firstly, before I go negative, I want to really praise Mika Richards and Daniel Sturridge because they didn't take his shit. And Mika Richards was first to be like, no, you're wrong. And the moment here is really when Carragher just goes, rolls his eyes and then stares straight down the camera like he does when he's like, trying to be Jim from The Office, and he's trying to have that funny moment where, you make, and it makes him look like an even bigger bellend. And his comments on AFCON, it only happens with this tournament. It only happens with this tournament. Nobody talks about the Copa America not being important when Messi wins it, right? Every time AFCON comes up, you get managers in the Premier League asking the players to drop out and not play in it. You've got people constantly deriding the level of quality and how important it is. Now, obviously, on this pod, we've covered every AFCON because I'm a football geek and it's a tournament that I absolutely love. So I'm determined to cover it because everyone should see how mental and incredible this tournament is. But every year it comes up. And like, Adam, it's just bias and racial bias for me that people's attitudes towards Africa on the whole, well, how can it be important? It's Africa. How can it be good? It's Africa. I'm not saying Jamie Carragher's anything. I'm just saying he needs to look at his biases and where these opinions and these attitudes come from, right?
100%. He had a quite blasé attitude when he kind of said it out loud. You know, he kind of made his kind of feelings well known to everyone that was watching, and yeah, he just comes across bigoted for the way that he, you know, kind of completely dismisses what AFCON is as a tournament and what it stands for. You know, I appreciate, like you say, like you might not consider it to the same degree as, say, the Euros or Copa America. However, please be respectful of the fact that this is a continent competition that actually is being quite fun. It's been quite interesting over the last decade. You know, we've had some phenomenal stories, you know, of smaller kind of African nations kind of progressing within this tournament, you know, and you can see it within the kind of group of players that do assemble for these kind of smaller nations, that actually they embrace those kind of opportunities. They really do bring their games, you know, and we hear of some fantastic stories. Don't get me wrong, there's also the political side of AFCON as well. You hear about the horrific ways that people try and put other nations off their games, you know, for example, Stadia, for example, holding teams hostages at airports, all sorts. But that's what makes it so special, is, you know, you've got that kind of rivalry alongside of it. I just had a few notes as well alongside, just to kind of reaffirm why AFCON is so popular. You know, it's been now hosted in various African nations over the 60-year period of the tournament. You know, we've probably been so used to the Euros only going to collective select nations. You know, how many times has it been to France, Spain, for example? You know, these nations always get it, whereas in Africa there seems to be a kind of understanding that it needs to go to different nations across the continent. We've also had, for 2023, a new viewership record, which was over 2 billion viewers worldwide. So this wasn't just within Africa, it's worldwide. But the fact for me is that how can he be so naive to dismiss players like Sadio Mane and Mo Salah in terms of their kind of attributes? They want to win this tournament, and you know, the likes of Egypt have won it numerous times. I think they're the record for the most. I think it's 7 times in total. So you know, I feel like you might not agree that it's a competitive tournament and you might not like watching it, but doesn't mean it's something special for other, you know, players of different nations. You know, they aspire to, and I think that's just the problem, isn't it? Is that everything's geared up towards the Premier League. It should be, you know, the Premier League is first above everything else. And yeah, also I feel with Jamie Carragher this year alone, he said a lot of clickbait kind of. I don't know if it's deliberate in that respect, but I feel like when he says things, he's trying to get a kick out of it. He's trying to appease a certain audience, and it completely goes away from what we know him for, which is good insight at the end of the day. So I've lost a lot of respect for Jamie Carragher, and I'm pretty much going to probably put him on mute now because I can't be arsed with him.
No, I'm saying, I think across the season I've been like, oh, just give it a rest, mate. And then this comment, I was like, for God's sake. But Andre, the last point for me is that like we're all quite happy, and the pundits themselves are quite happy to sit and praise, you know, Drogba and Essien and Salah, and you know, even like, you know, the play like Thierry Henry, like all these players of African descent or coming from African countries. We're all quite happy to turn around and talk about how we're the best league in the world because we've got these players. But then the second they want to represent their country, they're supposed to give that up. Like, and I promise you now, if you said to Salah, you can have a second Premier League title, or you can have a Premier League title, or you can win the AFCON with Egypt, I'm pretty sure I know what his choice is going to be. He's been pretty open about it in the past, right? But this hypocrisy between like between the players and then our attitude to the countries they represent is really quite jarring, I think.
Yeah, I think you guys have really explained it so well, of like highlighting all the things. And I think it's just, again, it's just something where it's just a stereotypical thought and no one really actually understanding and trying to learn and actually where this has come from, like you said, and how to, you know, go around it and actually stop kind of, and you're talking this in front of millions of people, like the place, you should be praising it is in those moments you should be saying, and that's what the sad thing is, that he's picking those moments to be like that, and again, it brings back the narrative all over again. So I just think um, a lot of it is stereotypical. I mean, even not as horrendous, but even the time when he was saying about Szczesny's he's always been a poor goalkeeper.
Yeah.
It's like you just remember this guy at Arsenal. You haven't seen his career for the last 10 years, and you're just saying because he's at Arsenal, that Szczesny, he's terrible.
Yeah.
So why I'm saying that is because it's a similar situation. It's like, it's terrible because, as I remember, it's always been terrible. So, and then Adam spitting the facts there, like that wasn't a pun, but I just thought
That's good one.
No, but the whole thing of the viewership. The whole thing of the viewership, how much it's gone up now, and like the obviously the whole connection to everything has gone miles up. It's like 2 billion now, so it's it's incredible to see. So I think again, it's just at the same time, I don't think it should be. The only thing we can say is shouldn't take it like hard because it's Jamie Carragher. He's done this, and unfortunately, but at the same time, we should, because it's just not acceptable to say it on the stage like that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Less spit, more thought.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. It was, and there you go, Jamie. You can take that home with you. You can take that home with you. Absolutely. I think. There's still that clip of him where he makes the joke about Katie Abdo cheating on her husband. And every time it comes up, the pain I feel in terms of cringe, and I just think since that point there should have been like, look, Jamie, I think you're done, man. I think that might be it. Like, it's one of the worst things I've ever seen on TV. That, so I think it's been going down for a while, but we will always be waving the flag for AFCON, and we can't wait for the next one because it's always unbelievable, that tournament. I'm excited. But we're actually going to talk about the Premier League. This is the Premier League pod. This is just me delaying, facing up to the fact of what happened this weekend, but I've delayed it long enough. Of course, the betting companies are paying out. Liverpool are 11 points ahead. It looks like the title race may well be over. We'll be breaking down their incredibly comfortable 2-0 win against Man City at the Etihad there. Of course, we'll be going to the Emirates. I ignored this game largely, but I saw enough to make me angry, so I can go through that. Then we'll be talking about a shootout between Newcastle and Forest, 4-3. That was a banger. We'll be laughing at Chelsea a little bit before we go and laugh at United and Everton a little bit as well. So there's plenty of action to talk about. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll see you on the other side. And we are back. Welcome back. It's time for the Premier League and the title race. I think it's all over. Adam, Liverpool 2, Man City 0. Before we talk about the kind of wider aspect of the title race, let's talk about the performance from Liverpool. I feel like this looked like Liverpool were rocking up and playing, I'm going to go for Fulham away. It felt like a really playing up against a mid-table team, perfectly comfortable, kept them at arm's length. Could have been 3, but they didn't really want a third. Could have been 6, but they didn't really want 6. It was very, very comfortable from Liverpool. I think City started quite well, but then the second they conceded, it was game over. Like, just incredible game management and quality from Liverpool, and playing no strikers.
Yeah, they, as you alluded to, they were quite comfortable for periods of this game. Absorbs any pressure that Man City did throw at them. It felt even when they did have moments of possession, they seemed to be better or more clinical with their kind of directness. And I think that was the difference. I think what was interesting was the formation choice as well, where Arne Slot went with a 4 up top, but kind of dynamically kind of transforms subject to the transitions of the game, which I felt was the real kind of reason why Liverpool dominated this match so well. I think they took advantage of the fact that when they look across to Man City's starting 11, they didn't really necessarily have too many players that could influence in the same manner that Liverpool's kind of midfield and their team could do. But what was interesting for me as well, and we've seen it numerous times in this kind of mini resurgence from Man City, is these banks of 4 that actually, from a Man City perspective, they seem to be quite dragged in terms of like the distances between them. This isn't the Man City that we're used to, where they seem to be a lot more closer together when they're kind of doing the possession bits. And also, what was interesting for me was when the ball does get transitioned behind that back line of four, they really do seem to struggle. They don't seem to be able to cope with it. And it seems to be either lack of control or, desire from a Man City perspective to own those kind of periods or moments in the game. There was a really good example of Rico Lewis where he goes down a rabbit hole, but he's got no one around him to help him out. And essentially it made Liverpool not really have to fight too hard for the ball, because they actually made it difficult for Man City to kind of transition. When Man City did have those moments, they were pretty wasteful in front of goal, and I think the reliance was on Mamouche. And we did see moments of Pep still having to drill it into Mamouche in terms of, I suppose, how to be more aligned with the rest of the squad. So I feel this is, Man City still very much in transition, despite the kind of uplift in certain results. We are seeing a Man City squad that really needs a few transfer windows before we see them back to what we've been used to and accustomed to. But that's a lot of credit to Arne Slot and the way that they approached it. I think they really controlled it. Even in the moments when Man City did have the ball, they pretty much went, here you go, have it. Throw as much as you can. We saw the likes of Gravenbach, for example, helping out Trent when Trent was struggling in those first few minutes of the game itself. I thought Doku was quite adventurous with his runs, but he didn't have anyone to really get the ball to. And I think that's what they were missing, was a Haaland-esque kind of striker presence. But ultimately, this goes down to the fact that Man City haven't been able to necessarily find the right kind of fluidity to their game, and it's played into Liverpool's hands. Ultimately, from a defensive point of view, Liverpool absorbed it, but like I say, they were just so much more direct. And when they were on the counter-attack, you just felt there was another goal coming about their game. Even at 2-0, they probably should have won this game quite handsomely, maybe 3 or 4. But it was a comfortable game in the end, Rory. And I felt it was, I suppose this is the most dominant performance that I've seen this season from this Liverpool squad. I think they've had good games, but this was where you could seriously say this is the most impressive we've seen Liverpool this season.
Well, I think they saw the opportunity after, obviously, Arsenal had lost the game. It was like, right, if we win this now, this is a huge statement. This gives us a bit of breathing space. We just need to, and it's just that professionalness, that kind of clinicalness of let's get the job done, in, out, no fuss, and then we can just move on to the next game. And it's really, the man management and stuff that Arne Slot is showing here, and the tactical nous with a team that is none of his players, right? This is still Klopp's squad, basically, is just absolutely astounding. But before we do wax lyrical about Liverpool and Mohamed Salah, because we will, Andrea, Man City, teams are happy for them to have the ball, as Adam alluded to. People aren't really worried about them in possession anymore. I think the saddest performance I saw was De Bruyne. It was really, really horrible watching him play like this. When we know how great he can be, obviously injuries and time catch up to most players, but it was quite stark, the drop off, right? And as the fans applauded him off, it felt a bit like a farewell. It was a bit odd, right?
Yeah, it kind of felt like it, but I also thought Guardiola's comments at the end kind of symbolised it as well, talking about, kind of the old guard, kind of the transition needs to happen. So I kind of think it's kind of in the works, really, that it has to be time where they've got to change it, unfortunately. All good teams come to an end. They've got to, and I think Adam's right, it's going to take another 2, perhaps even 3 windows to even get back to some sort of level. But then the question is, who's the manager at that point? Is Guardiola still going to be there? Which looks very unlikely at this moment in time. He's signed them for 1 more year, but further than that, we don't know. But I think it just goes to show in the Premier League, and a lot of games we've seen this season, like possession-based football, sometimes isn't just enough anymore to kind of control and win games. Like, teams aren't scared to counter, and they've got pace on the attack. There's so much dynamism in everyone's attack in this league that you can't really hold out for it. And possession-wise, it sometimes doesn't really work. And we've seen this from City the whole season, that it hasn't really, they've not been able to win games in this style they've been playing anyway. So I think it's quite damning, but I also think it's just highlights even more the key issues that are ultimately the reason why they're stalling now, and how perhaps the next few years we're going to see them kind of being up and down seasons, trying to transition, trying to bring in those young players through. But the key thing for the club going forward is that, that Haaland 9-year deal was massive. You've got probably the best striker and one of the best strikers in the world there for the next 10 years. Marmoush looks like a great player coming through. And again, the young players like Foden, they need to step up now and be that De Bruyne that they've needed this season, for example. So there's a lot of positives to go forward in the few seasons. I think the young players are there. It's just now being clever in the market and trying to replace these key players that are coming to the end of their career. But again, hell of a players to have to replace. Kevin De Bruyne ain't an easy player to replace. Rodri, although when he comes back from an injury, we don't know how he'll be, but even he's coming to that stage of his career as well. So they've got big shoes to fill, and they've got to get it right. So there's a lot of pressure on there.
Well, I saw today it was kind of leaked, maybe it's a thing in Manchester, but like 5 players apparently put on the transfer list, or their agents have been told you can look for a new place. These are Ederson, Kevin De Bruyne, Jack Grealish, I think it was Ruben Diaz and Bernardo Silva, I think were the 5. Maybe Kovacic was on there as well. But all these players have been told you can look for somewhere else next year. Replacing that much experience and those many players, this is like open heart surgery at this point in what they're trying to do. I do have to say I really like Kusanov. And I think he's going to be a fantastic player. They just need to stick with him a little bit. Doku, I saw a great comparison of, he's like, those Japanese restaurants you go when they're like throwing food about? He's like one of those chefs, but then when you get it, the food's burnt. Like, there was like 0 end product. There was loads of tricks. He went past Trent about 8 times in one run, but there was 0 end product. And I think you're always just like, okay, pass it. No, go, no, okay, shoot, no. And he's still got it. Like, bloody hell, mate. So I think it was one of those performances that, like, if you're a child, you're like, oh, this guy's great. But I actually didn't achieve it. But for Liverpool, it's all about one man, really. And I think as good as Slot has been and as good as this team have been, what we're looking at is a kind of, to borrow an American phrase, a Hall of Fame performance from one man. The numbers he's putting up are insane. Mohamed Salah, I think he is the difference, but he is that 11-point difference in the league at the moment. That is the season that Mohamed Salah is having, basically. Adam, where does he go in terms of Premier League greats? We don't usually do stuff like this, but my only stipulation will be he can't be better than Thierry Henry. It's not fair. But where do you think Mohamed Salah is currently entering the pantheon of Premier League greats, or has he already been there? Is this just confirm him a bit more?
Well, yeah, I was going to say he's not the LeBron James, because that's Christian Pulisic, isn't it? So
that title's been taken. Yeah.
That title's been taken. He's. I think we'll reflect on it when he's left the Premier League, unfortunately, and it feels weird to say that, but unfortunately, we're not necessarily appreciating the levels. I think Liverpool fans definitely do appreciate it, and I just feel like we're getting to that point. But I have to say, this season, I've kind of reflected to this is an absolutely incredible individual performance. Sometimes this is a funny thing with Mo Salah's game. He hasn't necessarily been completely on his attacking self every game, but he has those moments where he can just turn it. That's the difference between the caliber of when I remember watching Henry in his prime, was that it didn't matter how the game was going and whether he had a bad game, he would just turn it on. And this is what we're seeing with Mo Salah. There's that, not necessarily is he the best player on the pitch, but he can just create those moments. He can score goals. Even when he's in those highly pressured environments, he's still performing. He's absolutely incredible. I think just that kind of growth. I remember when he first came to the UK from Basel, fresh from the Champions League outings for them with Chelsea. That player, I never saw him being the Salah that we see these days. And that is a compliment to his professionalism, the approach. I think that kind of breakthrough happens at Andrea's Fiorentina before he went to Roma. And then we saw him just flourish under Klopp. at Liverpool. So he's been absolutely amazing. But this season's been absolutely phenomenal. Goal contributions. We're not talking even goals, and it's just the assists. He's got to be considered as a Hall of Famer, definitely, Roy.
Yeah, it's incredible. It always makes me think of, there was a clip where he was talking about advice he got, and it was from Arsene Wenger, and Arsene Wenger was like, just always stay in the game, always concentrate, you're always in the game. It's like, Arsene, shut the fuck up, have you seen what you're doing here? Don't give him advice. It just cost us a bloody title. But Andrea, when he was at Fiorentina, obviously Fiorentina fan yourself, did you see this player there? Did you think he could hit these levels?
1,000,000%. I'm not even joking. I don't want to say it because it's happened, but genuinely, you could see it. And I think it's just the kind of nature of like running with the ball. No one could stop him, and he had end product. And I think he was showing that there. He went to Rome and showed it even more. And then obviously the Liverpool move was the breakthrough move. And I've got to say, the Liverpool move was a perfect move for him. I think the way they play was perfect for someone like him to come in, be that main guy, and he's done it for the last, all these years now. But yeah, certainly at Fiorentina, you could see it. He had everything. He hasn't changed in the way he plays when he played at Fiorentina. He does at Liverpool. Obviously now he scores more goals, but the style of play is exactly the same. Even at Basel, when he was coming through, you could see it at Basel. I remember watching him in the Champions League against Chelsea again. Was incredible that game. Similar style. So yeah, absolutely. For me, I just wanted to add, I genuinely, I know it's harsh on Henry, but I think for longevity, I feel like there has to be a real conversation that he could be number one. Like I don't think that's crazy to say. I think you look at the goals and also the goal contributions, like Adam said, I think is incredible. I think it's one of the top we've ever seen in the league. And I think there has to be a question on that. Again, if Henry was in the league longer, I think Henry would be the guy. But I just think for the longevity reasons, I think Salah and consistency, again, it's not easy to score all these goals in every season he's done it. It's crazy. It's not normal. So again, for me, I think he's up there. I think he could easily be at the number one spot in the league. But yeah, incredible, and you can just see it. And his game's elevated, but he's also stuck to the same principles. So maybe he took the Wenger advice to the teeth, because he really has played the same and no one's been able to stop him. He's played the same way, the way he knows best, and no one could stop him. That's how you know he's just too good.
Yeah.
It always feels like he has 30 yards in front of him to run into, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, no matter what the game state is, it's always him, the ball over his shoulder, and just open field, and you're like, oh, Christ. Like, it just feels like that happens every single game. Like, yeah, it's just absolutely incredible. If he breaks Thierry Henry's... Sorry,
the only thing I wanted to add to that, though, for a funny thing, is that seeing Michael Richards in the same team, I don't know how he burst onto the scene. I don't know where that came from, because at Fiorentina was terrible. But I've got, every time he adds, because Richards talks about him like he's, he was like, no. But I got to put that in. I don't know when he burst onto the scene. I couldn't see it there, but
yeah, no, absolutely. If Mohamed Salah does break Thierry Henry's goal scoring and assist record in one season, and I think he's close to it, I think he could actually do it this year, then I think absolutely there's a conversation about it, but I will die on the hill of Thierry Henry at any level, of course. But yeah, let's kind of move on from this game and talk about the title race in general. I don't think it's going to be a controversial opinion. I don't know if anyone's going to disagree, but like Arsenal are still the favourites to win the league, right? Yeah, absolutely. Good. Moving on. So, no, I think this basically, Adam, this is kind of the title race done now, right? I think all Arsenal can do is put the pressure on, right? And pray. I don't know. It's done, right?
Yeah, I think it's fairly formidable that it will be Liverpool. I think they will still drop points if they're still kind of going into the latter stages of the Champions League. I feel like the back-to-back games will have an impact in terms of that stretched squad. We did see it recently, and obviously, whilst they didn't necessarily lose those games, they did drop some points potentially in the grand scheme of things. So I still think there is that over-reliance on the kind of current 11, it's fair to say. I think there'll probably be similar conversations about the types of players that will be still at Liverpool next season within that squad right now, and I'm sure Richard Hughes has probably been part of those conversations about how they transition into the squad that Arne Slot wants. But yeah, in terms of this, I think it's fairly on for Liverpool to be confirmed as the champions for sure.
Yeah, I think it'll be done by bloody April at this rate, but we will see. I do like what I did want to say really is that there's no other way of looking at it than Liverpool fully deserve this title. They've by far been the best team in the league. They've by far when even obviously my Arsenal heart was like praying that we would do it, but the whole time I was like, if we do it, it would be against all odds and it would make everyone really angry because we don't deserve it. And it was like, that was always in the back of my head because it was so clear that Liverpool have been the better team. They have been the best team. They've lost one game all year. And it's great to see, Mohamed Salah's going to get to pick up another Premier League trophy. Van Dijk will get another one before he goes because I think his legacy, or their legacy, deserves more than one Premier League title, if you know what I mean. Because a lot of context gets lost 10 years down the line and you forget how close they were. But just having more than one for those players, I think would just be a really big thing for them and give them a bit more of the credit that they massively deserve. So I think it's just been a fantastic season from them. But next year, it is going to be interesting to see how they transition because all those players I've mentioned are running out of contract. So I think that's where the real work starts after this season for Liverpool. And when we'll see. And I think they have got the right person, but with Arne Slot, for him to transition and get the team, the next generation going and keep them competitive. But I think, it'll be a hell of a send-off for those players, I think. So, stranger things have happened. The bookies paid out on United and we came back and won it, but I'm not holding my breath this time. Let's very quickly go to Arsenal. We're not actually going to talk about it that much or the game that much because it was pretty terrible. Fair play to West Ham. Really well taken goal. The cross and the play from Wan-Bissaka was incredible. Calafiori could have done better, but it was a great header from Bowen. I think all of this, as I was saying, with the kind of the feeling I've had through this Arsenal season, it felt like from the very beginning nothing went right for us. Nothing was going right for us. Every decision seemed to go against us. Not to say that's the deciding factor, but a lot did. But what has cost us is our recruitment in the summer. We had a small squad when we started the season. Arteta said it. We got injuries, and the board still didn't invest. And I think that's basically where the blame lies. Arteta has plenty of lessons to learn because we are still dropping points against the same four teams, Fulham, Newcastle, Villa and West Ham, every single year. They take points off us every single year. They're the deciding factor. So Arteta does need to learn how to be more tactically diverse, give players more chances. But again, that all feeds into the fact that we've got 18 fit players and 17 of them are left backs. You know what I mean? So I think the recruitment has just absolutely shafted us this year. At this point, as long as we can finish second and at least get to play Real in the Champions League, I will take it because I don't think there's much more to play for in this season, unfortunately. All a bit depressing, but that's going to be all the Arsenal chat. Unless any of you have anything to say about Arsenal, I don't know, any thoughts?
Not really. I think you've summed it up really nicely. Just the fact that also outside of the 11, again, very similar scenario where Arteta's trust on certain individuals, I think, has played a part in this season. And also, I think tactically, there's been certain games where it needs to be called out that he's got things wrong as well. And whilst he's got things really spot on, there's been other occasions where he's got it completely wrong. And I think he's learned from this season for sure.
It's a big learning curve, and there's a lot of pressure on next summer and next season for Arsenal now because finishing twice 3 years in a row, it's kind of always the bridesmaid, never the bride. You need to get over the line at some point. But hopefully it will be a big summer where we get Osimhen, Isak and Šeško and everything will be fine. But let's leave that game there and we could go for a real 4-3-3. That'll be fun. And let's go to the score fest that was Newcastle United 4, Nottingham Forest 3. My favourite goal, weirdly, was the Isak penalty because it wasn't quite a Rabona, but it was kind of a Rabona. Matt Sells will be quite annoyed with himself there. But Adam, I think the main talking point here is the race for Europe. Forest, they're shaking a little bit. They're conceding a lot of goals. It looks like, are they running out of road? What do we think?
No, I think there's a lot to say about that second half performance that gives you a bit of hope if you're not a Forest fan. I feel, there's always going to be games where maybe they weren't at the races, in particular for this first half. Newcastle completely dominated them. They were really shaken by the goals, I feel, and the movement of Newcastle. But in the second half, they really nullified them, and if anything, they applied the pressure on them, and that's the threat that they've got within this squad. I think there's a lot of credit that I feel that they, on another day, they actually get a point, and potentially then you wonder whether Newcastle have the mentality to see it through as well, because I think when they are at a point where it's level, I feel maybe they could have crumbled. I didn't feel at moments that they were very solid, especially in that second half. So a lot of credit has to go to Nottingham Forest. Look, I think they're in a surprise position themselves. Whether they naturally see themselves in the top four, I think most people and most fans would have said this is definitely out of sorts. This isn't where we expected to be. But they're performing really well, solidly as a group of individuals that have kind of molded into this team. We've said it many a time, the individuals, the likes of Elliot Anderson, for example, he was bought as a forward. Milinkovic, who we know about his credentials in Serie A, has been phenomenal the way that he's superbly just slotted into that defensive line and made him far more solid at the back. Morello, again, superb for them in defensively point of view. And then just from an attacking point of view, the fact that they've had to rotate it in the last few weeks kind of shows you that they've still had that continuity in terms of goals and contributions overall. So I'm not too phased by this result, but I'd be gutted, I suppose, in the manner of how they kind of let it be so simple in the first half, potentially. And they'll probably regret that. But yeah, it does make it a bit more interesting for the game that does take place coming up tomorrow evening against Arsenal. So I'm sure you are shitting a brick. It's fair to say.
I hate going to the City ground anyway. Their record against us is really good. And at the moment, it feels like if you score one against us, we're going to lose because we've just got nothing. So I'm really, really not looking forward to that game. But, Andrea, I'm going to go to you. Newcastle, it looked like they were not going to get Europe this year. They're firmly in the conversation now. Isak behind Salah, the most clinical striker in the league, I think, at this point. Unbelievable form. 2 goals in 2 minutes. Obviously, Newcastle are always a little bit streaky, but they should be finishing in the European spots this season now, right?
Yeah, and I think that game would give them a big lift as well. I mean, being a rival in terms of the European positions as well. We've seen like Chelsea obviously slipping up now, so they've got a real good chance to take advantage and make a good run of it as well. So, but again, and that's probably frustrating for you to see, Rory, that having a real top striker, what it can really do to a team. And if he's anywhere else in the league, Liverpool would be worried in terms of challenging the title. Not going to name which team that would be, but again, it's just they've got that quality of him up top, and I think again it makes a difference. He's done it so many times this season and previous seasons as well. So yeah, they should be up there, and I think they've just got to get back to the way that they've been playing and not get carried away with the emotion of like potentially losing it or when games go against them and stuff. So I think sometimes they, like you said, I think they get a bit on and off, and I think that's when they need to kind of try and keep it to the basics that they're doing and stick to what's working well for them. Similar to Forest, I think I agree with Adam. They don't have to worry either. I think they just need to be when they're themselves. They can respond well. So it's just about taking advantage of the other teams dropping around them as well. And I think they've got the catalyst to do it. They've just got to now, implement them in the next few games and see where it takes them. But certainly, in terms of the teams in this league, they definitely have to be a favourite now to get at least the Europa League spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm personally hoping it's Europa League because Isak wants Champions League. So I'm firmly hoping that you finish fifth. Not fifth, sixth, because fifth is Champions League this year, isn't it, the Premier League? Bloody hell, he's never going to bloody come to us. Anyway, let's move on from that game, I think, because I'm very aware of time. And let's go to the next game we wanted to talk about, which was, well, we have to go to Goodison Park, really, before we go to Villa Park. Everton 2, Manchester United 2. Should it have been 3-2? Adam, I'm going to go to you. I'm bitterly disappointed that Everton threw away this 2-goal lead. We are seeing Beto. Unbelievable. Seeing him really sprinting, stretching defences, putting the ball across. I thought the ball across for Decore's goal as well was a really well-placed pass as well. Really good little bit of play. It looked like Everton were comfortable, but 2 individual moments of brilliance kind of got United back into the game. I kind of think Pickford should do better on both. I don't know if I'm being harsh. Maybe the free kick he was unsighted. I don't know. What do you think he could be questioned there for those goals?
I think it's just the pace of the ball, the way that it's hit, especially that free kick. I think is superbly hit by Fernandes. There might be an argument with Ugarte's potentially, but I can be sympathetic for what you're saying. But I think from a goalkeeping perspective, I think it's very hard sometimes when you've got a mass of bodies in front of you sometimes, and you're trying to judge the flight of the ball as well, and the direction of the ball sometimes as well. That plays a part in this. So, yeah, I feel. Yeah, it was unlucky on Everton. I think on the grand scheme of things, would they have taken a point? 100% they would have taken a point. But yeah, I think it was individual brilliance that brings it, and you summed it up really nicely there. But as you say, I feel potentially they have an opportunity to make it 3-2 with that Ashley Young incident. I was surprised at the use of VAR and the intervention. I don't know why that became a thing in this particular incident. It does cast a bit of doubts over it. I'm surprised there's not been much more calling towards the likes of Howard Webb to explain why it was intervening for that very moment. I'm firmly of the belief that despite the angle that the referee was shown, if you look at it from a different angle, he's definitely been put off by the kind of shirt tugging from De Ligt that gets him to be rolled over by, obviously, I don't blame him, but Harry Maguire is in that incident as well. It's not Harry Maguire foul. It's definitely De Ligt that makes a foul, and I'm surprised that it wasn't given as a penalty. So, I just don't understand. If you're the referee calling for the angles, I'd be asking for another angle just to confirm my choice before I actually made it. So, yeah, very surprising. I've been curious, like David Moyes was, about the audio for that particular moment. And it's strange.
Yeah, I think the point, I thought it wasn't a penalty because I think the referee thought it wasn't a penalty because Ashley Young goes down really theatrically and he properly tries to sell it. And I think that's where he's gone, all right, well, he's trying to have me on there and he's taking it away. But I agree. So I think in theory, letter of the law, I'm not sure it's a penalty. But that's not the issue. The issue is, why did the ref intervene, like you said? Why did they say, because we're still, like, Andrea, we're still trying to figure out what the like kind of cusp is for what is worth, like, clear and obvious error. But it didn't seem like this would be the one to intervene on, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what unfortunately gets questioned. What is a clear and obvious error? Because that, for me, wasn't a clear and obvious error. I think it was justified in the decision at the time to give it. And I don't see any reason why not. And again, I kind of with you, Rory. I think the theatrical way that Young went down perhaps put them off in terms of, like, was the shirt pulling up for him to fall like that? And to be fair, I do kind of agree with that. However, I just think it was so clear. Like, you're stopping him from getting to the ball by pulling his shirt. Like, I don't see what sort of magic you need to realize that was clear. But I find it quite fascinating that they kind of focus more on Maguire rather than De Ligt's involvement, which again makes us question. Of course, it would be interesting to hear the audio, because are they just favouring it on the fact that they just looked at one situation and didn't clear the other side? Did they actually look at De Ligt's in more detail? And I think and De Ligt's situation was way more convincing as a penalty than Maguire's was. I think Maguire's tug could have been not given, but De Ligt's, for me, certainly, I thought was definitely a blatant pull. And again, if the response is because of that, then it goes up the question that is VAR checking every situation. It should be, if Maguire's is not a foul, right, we clear that. Now we focus on De Ligt to see if his involvement was any damaging or anything. Right, clear, then we say it's not a penalty. And I don't think that simple process isn't being followed. And then that's where, obviously, unfortunately, VAR gets scrutinised yet again. And again, for me, the big issue is it's not a clear and obvious mistake. And I think it's happened quite recently again for Everton in the same fixture. I think, was it an offside goal where Everton, the player, was nowhere near, and they gave it an offside goal, and it wasn't. Like, it shouldn't have. It's terrible. Again, VAR, again, unsurprisingly, under the radar.
Maybe it's just because they're used to blaming Maguire. Maybe it's just like, they're so used to everything being blamed on Maguire. They're like, well, it must be him. Let's just check him. It must be him. Poor Harry. Although I do think the first goal, the defending collectively by United for that first goal was absolutely comical. Like the amount of times they headed it like vertically up into the air for it to just come straight back down was just like bloody hell, one years get rid of it. And again, rapidly becoming one of my favourite people in the Premier League, Ruben Amorim, in his press conferences is absolutely quality. And someone asked him why are Everton having a new manager bounce and yet Man United on? He just said, "Well, obviously he's doing a better job than me." It's such a great answer. And he, in that hoodie, he looked like late stage Mourinho even more. You know, like when he's sleeping in his car, like he really looked like it was. I think sometimes you just need a stylist to be like, look, I don't care how you feel, just put a suit on. It makes it look a bit better. Like he looked a bit scruffy, bless him. But United did show a bit of fight. They did get back into it, and they'll take the positives where they can at the moment. The last game we're going to talk about slightly in depth, I suppose. Aston Villa 2, Chelsea 1. Marcus Rashford 2 assists, Asensio 2 goals. Chelsea no goalkeepers. It is brilliant how they have bought about 6 goalkeepers and none of them are any good. Andrea, let's start with that. When I play Football Manager, right, sometimes I buy too many young players. I'm like, oh crap, I've got to sell off of them now. And they don't get good because I've not had a chance to play them, right? And now I have to sell them now. And this is basically what Chelsea have done. They've got so many young players now that none of them are actually going to be able to develop. So eventually they're all just going to get sold to Brighton and Forest and whoever else. Like, why can they not find a functional goalkeeper? Like, I felt bad for the lad, but that was shocking at the end.
Honestly, I don't understand. I think, again, it's just overpaying on certain players that we're thinking that they can do certain things. Like Sanchez can play with his feet, but do they look at his other things they can do wrong? Like Jorgensen, again, up and coming, but have they seen him longevity-wise? Is he been any good? So again, it's just signing players from certain attributes rather than looking at the bigger picture. And I think that seems to be the key issue. And then not even just in the goalkeeper positions, in lots of positions.
Yeah.
Arsenal bid Mudryk. We can't let them have it. We'll pay 100. I don't think we've ever seen him before, but we don't want Arsenal to get him. Like that's what it feels like. So again, it's the approach. And you're absolutely right. It's going to get to the point where they're going to have to sell, and that's what we're going to see. And again, they're going to sell, but who are they going to invest in? Who's going to want to go at this point? It's a mess. It's not really a nice place to go to at the moment, which is really sad to see because, you know, back in the day, the whole structure and core they had, it's gone. And now it's like for me, like I for my side, because I grew up obviously here, I grew up supporting Chelsea. And for me right now, I find it hard to watch them anymore. I don't know. And I feel like their soul's gone. I feel like it's not the same anymore, and it makes you not want to watch them. And again, it's the simplest things of these type of transfer situations, and it's always another talking point, another player coming in, another player coming out. And then these players that go out, you see them playing well, and then you're realizing, why didn't they give them a chance? But they can't because they've got too many, and so on. So yeah, it's a big mess, and it makes you realize how good it is when you've got teams like Arsenal, Liverpool, which are run really good in terms of they've got a core 11, and and when they sign someone, it's to actually improve the team, or that's the way to go. This kind of half arse of like, oh, I'm going to buy this guy, I'm going to buy that guy, I'm going to buy that guy. It's not going to work long term wise, and it's creating more mess when there really is a big mess. So that's the frustrating thing I'd say but the goalkeeper thing definitely highlights the bigger picture, the microcosm, if that's the word, of the bigger picture.
No, absolutely. And we've talked about the long term, but in the short term, Adam, Maresca now 2 wins in 9, I think it is. Under pressure, but they do have their Southampton token next, so they can get a win against Southampton, which will maybe take a little bit of the pressure off. But is he going to be in charge next year? I feel like he had a really positive start, but it's all unraveling.
In one breath, I would say no. In another, I'd say yes. I think from a continuity point of view, they need to stick with him because you can't keep chopping and changing. Obviously, they disagreed with Pochettino. I feel Maresca is more of a yes man, so he's going to work with the group of players. So from that point of view, you change him you're going to have to try and source someone else that's going to like be happy with the situation, which I just don't think, if you're trying to aspire to be like a top class, candidate, that they're going to accept everything that you direct to them. But equally, the football hasn't really pushed on. I feel this, kind of form has been very much down to the fact that Maresca has been blasé and maybe overlooked some of the downfalls of this squad at the moment and the way that they're playing. This mistrust towards Robert Sanchez, for example. I don't know if that was really something that he should have gone in with a lot more conviction. I think as soon as he's starting to have errors, he should have dropped him from that moment onwards. But ultimately, I think it's down to Andrea's point, is that there isn't enough experience within the group of players that they've got. They need to get players that know what it means, but more importantly, what to do in those sort of scenarios, and bring the group of players within that squad. I don't think he's got that within the kind of a mass of players that he's got. He hasn't got leaders within that group. If we allude to the likes of Thiago Silva, that was probably the last of that group of players. I think even when he came in, he did a solid job. But you missed him as soon as he went out of that squad. And I feel that's the problem that you've got at Chelsea, is that you haven't got that core of players that you can rely on. And whilst I don't dispute that there probably could be some in the future, the likes of Fernandes looks like potentially one of them, but I don't know if I necessarily see him as being a player that I would trust in a kind of group in the season. The likes of Cole Palmer potentially, but again, there's a lot of trust towards him. I think he's getting played out of games at the moment due to the fact that people know how to play against him. Just put two players on him and you can nullify his threats. And I feel that's the problem. Chelsea have got to think outside of the box. They need to think creatively. And also, certain players don't seem to want to be there. And Nkunku is a good example of that, where he clearly he can't wait for the next paycheck. Personally, I think he wants to move on for his career benefits, but also ultimately he can see that there's going to be probably an issue of trying to get him to go somewhere else now because of how high his wages are. I think that's the real issue that Chelsea have. They've created their own dilemma essentially, Rory, by attracting these players.
Paying anyone out of these contracts is going to be an absolute nightmare, and God knows what wages they're on, and none of these players are going to be selling at a profit because none of them have done well enough that you're going to be able to ask for more than what you bought them for. So it's like the whole thing is just completely incredible. I saw an interview with, what's his name? Bergdahl? Is it Bergdahl? And he was talking about how they run the American clubs and stuff. I'm just like, guys, it's just not the same. It is just not the same. Yeah. They just don't seem to understand it. But we should give quite a lot of credit to Aston Villa. They did this really amazing thing. I wasn't aware you could do it. In January, they signed some attackers, and now they can score goals. It's a really novel idea, but it seems to be working. I think Arteta should be looking over and taking some notes. Rashford and Asensio with a lovely little link up. I cannot wait for Rashford's first goal. It is coming. But I think in general, Andrea, his performances have been really good since he turned up at Villa. He looks lively. He looks confident again. I think Emery might be able to get the best out of him again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, ultimately, the weight's off his shoulder, going to Villa, the expectation of him having to perform, the pressure and the toxicity he would have got at Man United is not there at Villa. And he's got to be able just to get his head down and play games. And when he does that, he's a really top player. He's just had that pressure that unfortunately probably wear down to him too much on the pitch for Man United. But there's a player there, and you can see him out wide as well, making contributions as well as in the final third as the number 9. So again, he's got a lot to his game, and fundamentally for Villa, I think was a very clever signing because just add that depth. Losing to Iran, not panicking, signing someone with Premier League experience. I think it was a clever business, and we're going to see him elevating his game even more. Be interested to see what happens in the summer, but certainly in terms of his performance yet again, I think he's done everything right but score. Like you said, the goal's coming. He's just done everything spot on so far, and I like his attitude. I think he's took it well. He hasn't seen it as like a downgrade, even though it's not.
No.
But people could argue it could be. But he's treating it like it's a big move as it is, and he's got his head down and he's really giving everything for the team. So And I think that's what is impressive, because again, he had a lot of pressure coming to Villa, and having to get some of it right at least, because to kind of, otherwise people would verify, okay, the struggles we saw at Man United is just him then, whereas he's had to prove a point, and we're seeing him prove that point really well. So I'm really happy to see it, because I really think he's a top player, and he's an exciting player to watch on his game. So it's great to see.
Absolutely. And seeing him in the Champions League for Villa, his experience could be huge. Him and Asensio, like with all that Champions League experience, could be absolutely massive for them. In a squad that doesn't have a huge amount of Champions League experience, that could be really telling for them, and a very clever move. But we're going to very quickly wrap up the other results. Leicester got battered again at Brentford 4, Leicester 0. All three teams that came up look like they are going down, much like last season. Bit of a worrying trend for the Premier League. We might address that in another episode where we have a bit more time. That being said, Wolves got a 1-0 win over Bournemouth. Cunha with a lovely little finish again, and an even nicer celebration. I saw the video on their social media. It was dedicated to a young Wolves fan called Junior. So he did a little J that was quite cool. I enjoyed that. Huge result for Wolves, that, and kind of makes them a little bit more comfortable in the league. Crystal Palace with a 2-0 win away over Fulham. Glasner got Palace back in form, Bam back in form. Again, another lesson in showing patience and sticking to your manager if you know you got the right man. They very easily could have sacked him at the beginning of the season. Tottenham beat Ipswich 4-1. They're back scoring again, so they're flying. And then Brighton 4, Southampton 0. Southampton are going to be worse than Derby. I'm claiming it. They're not going to get another 2 points the rest of the season. I did see a social media post from Aaron Ramsdale, and I just felt so sorry for the boy, honestly. He was just like, we're doing our best. I was like, yeah, I'm sure you are, mate, but bloody hell, it is grim. That is your Premier League weekend, though, guys. That's all of the results. We're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, Adam's going to take us through all the midweek and all next week's action. Are you ready? We are. We'll see you there. And we are back. It's time for your midweek and weekend fixtures, brought to you by Adam Gipke. Let's do it.
So the round of 27 games starts from tomorrow, or Tuesday evening as you're listening to us, hopefully. So we'll start off with the South Coast Derby. That is Brighton and Hove Albion taking on Bournemouth. That's at 7:30 p.m. We've also got, at the same time, Crystal Palace taking on Aston Villa, whilst we also see Wolverhampton Wanderers at home to Fulham. Before, at 8:15, we see Chelsea at home to Southampton. Then we move into Wednesday's fixtures, starting at 7:30, and we've got Brentford at home to Everton, Man United at home to Ipswich Town, Nottingham Forest against Arsenal, and Spurs against Man City. Before, at 8:15, we see Liverpool at home to Newcastle. And then finally, on Thursday, we see West Ham at home to Leicester, and that is a 8 p.m. kickoff time. Then we move into the round of 28 games, and that starts on Saturday. So starting off at our beloved 12:30 p.m. kickoff time, we've got Nottingham Forest at home to the Man City before we move into the 3 p.m. fixture times. So we'll start off with Brighton and Hove Albion at home to Fulham before we also see Crystal Palace at home to Ipswich, Liverpool at home to Southampton before we then move into the 5:30 p.m. kickoff time where Brentford host Aston Villa. And then at 8 p.m. we've got Wolverhampton Wanderers at home to Everton. We then move into Sunday's fixtures. Starting at 2 p.m, we've got Chelsea at home to Leicester City. At the same time, we've also got Spurs at home, or should I call them the North White Lily Whites, whatever they want to call themselves these days. But yeah, 2 p.m, it's Spurs at home to Bournemouth. And then at 4:30, we've got the big game over this Sunday fixture, and that is Manchester United at home to Arsenal. Finally, on Monday, we've got at 8 p.m, West Ham United at home to Newcastle. And there you go, Rory. That is your round of 27 and 28 fixtures.
I'm crapping myself about both of these games. If we lose to pissing United, you might not see me on this pod ever again, I'll be honest, because I don't know if I'll be able to recover. But yeah, it's in God's hands now, I suppose. Listener, as always, thank you for joining us. It means the world to us that you choose to spend your time with us. Go and check out the Serie A episode. There's still a title race there, and it's getting pretty exciting. So we went into all of that. and lots more. Plenty of funny own goals that we got into as well. You can find us on social media, on all the social medias at Anglo-Italian Pod, apart from Elon Musk's Twitter, where we are at Italian Anglo Pod. Please make sure to give us a write-in and a subscription, a review, whatever, rating I meant, on your podcast app of choice. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button down here somewhere, please. And we'll see you next week. Thank you very much, guys. See you later.